So it is Heritage Day. We've been speaking about the ties that bind us, or the things that separate us. We've been speaking about South Africa being one of the most highly unequal societies in the world, the reason why we are so deeply divided. And we've been talking also, we're talking now really about why South Africa needs to heal the collective wounds to end the heritage of trauma. Nomfundo Mogapi is from the Center for Mental Wellness and Leadership, founder and CEO. A very good evening to you, and thank you so much for speaking to us. So we may all have different perspectives of when we talk about heritage traumas, obviously depending on which side of the privilege line you are behind, and if you recognize it as such. We've been having this conversation in the past hour, but talk to us about this, your organization, the work that you do, and how you've been able to encapsulate this concept.
Thank you, Thabisa. Thank you so much for having me on this important day. I think what we've been saying as an organization is that whilst, yes, we use Heritage Day to celebrate and acknowledge how far we've come from as a country and celebrate those that have given us our freedom, we're really calling on us to use this particular Heritage Day because it's really happening at a critical moment in our country. We've just dealt with COVID-19 and all the emotional impact of that. We've had the recent looting, and now we have the elections coming. And for us, really, the important question is, what kind of inheritance do we want to give the next generation? What is it that we want to transfer to the next generation? And our argument is that whilst the previous generations definitely gave us an inheritance of freedom, unfortunately, they didn't deal with the wounds that have caused these divisions that we have that threaten our social cohesion. So what we are calling upon us, and what we're calling upon for ourselves as South Africans, is can we please take this time to realize that if we don't deal with these wounds, they are the ones that are threatening the social cohesion. The divisions in our country have deepened, things have gotten worse, and we need to invest in healing these wounds so that we don't really see again another eruption of collective violence in our country that will sabotage the very things that we are currently celebrating through this Heritage Day.
So what is the archaeological evidence of how we have suffered differently in our corners, whether it's been ethnically, racially, from a gender sphere? I mean, when we talk about land, for instance, we have time frames. We look at 1913, but others argue it was long before that. And how has it affected us in our different racial groupings as well? Because we've seen the recent violence in both KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, and many saying it's because of their underlying issues that have not really been dealt with. If we look at some of, when we talk about gender-based violence, for instance, some people say the violence of apartheid on the psyche of the black man who was a migrant labor, for instance, must be accounted for. And there are people who disagree. So talk to us about the archaeological evidence that is there about where we're from as a nation.
So I think even before I touch on that archaeological evidence, we need to first of all understand the developments in the field of trauma studies. We've learned in the past decade there have been such rapid studies around trauma, its impact on our brain, its impact on our genetics. And there is now an agreed conclusion in the sector that happened to us as people. The trauma we've experienced, the wound that we've experienced matters and really has an impact on how we show up in our families, in our society, and in our institutions. What we are also finding in trauma studies is that impact is not just only what we have experienced personally, but the historical trauma that get transferred to us from our parents and our grandparents. But we are also now learning that even collective trauma, when a group of people have collectively been targeted, whether because of their race, because of their ethnicity, that memory becomes a collective trauma memory. Now, what does that mean then for us as South Africans? What it means is that we really, as a society, are carrying, as the current generation, this burden of this historical, this collective, and this personal trauma, which we are finding out that it is definitely impacting the way in which we are responding. And that's why for us, the looting that has happened was a wake-up call. It was really a symptom of these underlying issues that we really need to deal with as a society. So there is evidence to show that there's a direct correlation between us not addressing what happened to us in the past and some of the violence and some of the ways in which we react to the challenges that we face as society, as institutions, as families, and most importantly, as those that are supposed to lead in such contexts.
And it's such a pity that we have run out of time, because I wanted to talk to you about the notion that there is intellectual poverty in dealing with these problems from a policy perspective, that some say is completely devoid of African thought and culture in, finding solutions to these problems. Nomfundo Mogapi, founder and CEO of the Center for Mental Wellness and Leadership. Thank you very much, though, for speaking to